Alright, hello everybody. Here we are for lesson 5, our first lesson after taking our test. We are going to be doing solving quadratic equations today. It says part 1 because we are going to learn 3 different ways to solve quadratic equations over the next couple weeks. Alright, so solving quadratic equations day 1. Our objective today, we are going to solve quadratic equations by square roots. Now this first page here, I just kind of want to do a really simple recall over what simplifying square roots is, just so that it kind of can bring it back into your brain a little bit. Alright, so pause the video as always, play when you need to. So here is the first question. If I were to do the square root of 27, remember, I'm simplifying a radical, simplifying a square root, something you did in part A of Algebra 2 Essentials, no matter who you had. Okay, so if I take 27 and I break down 27 into what multiplies to it, like for instance 9 times 3, and I break down the 9, which is 3 times 3, remember I'm breaking it down in this tree into the prime factors, so I can't go any further. Then remember, the whole idea of simplifying a square root is to take out a perfect square. So if you look right here, I have a pair of 3s. Okay, well, 3 times 3 is 9. The square root of 9 is 3. So that tells me that a 3 goes on the outside, while this 3, who has no pair, goes on the inside. Just so you can see one here that does not have the same number on the inside and outside, if I do the same thing with the square root of 80, so I have 8 and 10, however you want to break it down, you could have done 2 and 40. This 10 is 2 times 5. This 8 is 2 times 4, and then this 4 here is 2 times 2. Okay, again, when I'm simplifying a square root, anything that is a perfect square will come out. So these pair of 2's right here makes a perfect square of 2 squared. So that means a 2 comes out of the radical. This perfect square right here is 2 squared, so another 2 comes out of the radical with a 5 that stays on the inside. So this simplified is 4 square root of 5. If you are having trouble with the simplifying radicals and you need some extra distance, make sure you let me know, and I can either send you a few more videos of some extra examples, or I can get you in for tutoring to work on that. Alright, we are going to solve equations using square roots here. You're going to pause to write this down. When you're solving equations by using square roots, first, you want to isolate the squared term. Okay, so whatever is squared, you're isolating it. After you isolate the squared term, then you are going to square root both sides, because square root is the opposite of squaring. Okay, now this part down here is very, very, very important. It says don't forget the plus or minus sign. Anytime we solve a quadratic, there will be 2 answers. Okay, when we're solving by square roots, the only way to get 2 answers is that there is a positive and a negative, and I will show you what I mean by that on our first example here in a moment. After you isolate square root, not forgetting to put the plus or minus, well, then you're going to isolate the variable, and in that sense right there, you're just solving at the end. Okay, so here's our first example. 3x squared equals 27. So what I have found is helpful when I'm doing questions like this, if you have a highlighter or if you have a colored pencil next to you, you could say, hey, here is my squared term. Oh, that color did not work out very well for me. Let's see if I can pick a different color. Okay, my squared term is just right here, that x squared. Okay, another way that you could do this is you could say that my squared term is, Lordy almighty, oh, get the right tool that I want here. My squared term is just the x squared right there. Put a box around it. Okay, well, what is keeping that x squared from being isolated? Well, right now this says 3 times that, right? So solving a basic equation you know that to get rid of a multiply by 3, we need to divide by 3. So now we have this, x squared equals 9. Okay? Well now, opposite of x squared here is square root. Whenever you square root a squared, these are opposites. Kind of like our multiply and our divide were opposites a minute ago. Okay? So those are opposites. So now I'm left with this, x equals. Well, we know that the square root of 9 is 3. But we also know that a negative 3 times a negative 3 will also get us a positive 9. Okay, that is why we put the plus or minus to get two separate answers. Okay, because a positive 3, when you square it, is equal to 9. A negative 3, when you square it, is also equal to positive 9. Okay? So here's example number 2. Go ahead and write it down, and I want you to put a box around your squared term. I'll do the same. So your squared term is just the x squared, nothing else. Everything else on the outside of it is not part of the squared part. Okay, so if that was a basic equation that just said negative 2x, you would probably tell me that, hey, I need to subtract 7 first. Our basic algebra rules come into play here. Okay, again, my squared term is still just the x squared that I'm trying to isolate. Well, now I can divide both sides by negative 2. And now I have x squared equals a positive 25. Now, opposite of squaring something, now we're ready to square root. The moment I put that square root symbol in, okay, so that square and square root are opposites, I'm going to remember, hey, plus or minus must be part of my answer. Okay, square root of 25 is 5. Now, I promise they are not always going to end up as beautiful answers, okay? The first two did here. Here's the third example. If you have not already, you've written it down, you've said, hey, here's my squared term. And if I go to solve this to get x by itself, well, first, I might want to subtract 11. Negative 5 x squared equals 5. So my squared term is still right here. I'm going to get rid of that negative 5 by dividing by negative 5. So now I have this, x squared equals negative 1. Now, here's something that's tricky. If I try to square root both sides right now, and if you have a calculator handy, you're going to try to square root negative 1. What times itself 2 times is negative 1? Well, absolutely nothing. We cannot square root a negative. Okay, this over here cannot happen. So what we do when we square root a negative is we say, hey, there is actually no, and I'm going to be specific, there is no real solution. We are not going to get into what the type of solution is in this class, but there is no real solution. Okay? Hey, there's an example. I want you to pause it, write it down, and I want you to try to solve it on your own. Alright, so here we go. If you made it this far, you probably realized, hey, 20 is not a perfect square. So right now you just have it written as plus or minus square root of 20. Now, here's where we take one more step if we can. Our bell work, or not a bell work, but our beginning page there, and when we talked about simplifying, can I simplify that square root of 20? Meaning, is there a perfect square that comes out of there? Well, I can break this down. Let's say maybe I want to do 2 and 10. You can do 4 and 5. This is 2 and 5. Well, sure enough, I have this pair of 2's right here that make a perfect square. Okay, now, when that goes on the outside, that means I now have x equals. That 2 needs to be touching that square root, meaning it's going to go after that plus or minus. And then this 5 is going to go on the inside. Alright? Here's another example for you. I want you to give it a try. Alright, there it is, worked out for you. So, you will stop on this question at your x equals plus or minus square root of 11. You cannot go any further than that. 11 does not break down. Got a few more examples I'm going to do with you here today. So, looking here, so our squared term on this problem the squared term is actually the x plus 4 squared. This is what we're going to get alone first this time. We do not distribute that negative 3. Okay? We're going to solve this equation just the same as we have been, meaning we're going to get rid of anything that's on the outside. Okay, so I'm going to subtract the 2. Negative 3 x plus 4 squared equals negative 36. My squared term is still that x plus 4 squared. Okay, divide that by negative 3. And we end up with this, x plus 4 squared equals 12. Now here's where it gets a little different. Okay, I'm going to get rid of that squared the same way. I'm going to square root. Okay, so I have my x plus 4 equals plus or minus square root of 12. And here's where not much changes. I'm still going to take 12. And I'm going to break it down and see if there's any perfect square that can come out. And there happens to be one. Okay, I do have a perfect square of 2's that come out. Oh, I got a little crazy with my circle. Perfect square of 2's that come out. Okay, so I have that x plus 4 still on the left. Plus or minus, I have a 2 outside the square root, a 3 inside the square root. Okay, now the final step here on this question, you are going to subtract the 4. Now, that 4 is not part of the square root in any way, shape, or form. So when I write my answer with the 4, that 4 is going to go in front of minus 4 plus or minus the 2 square root of 3. It is not part of the square root, so I just put it in front of that plus or minus symbol. So that this here is my answer. Here's another one for you. I want you to give it a go as far as you can, and I'm going to play the video where I think you're going to need some help. Alright, so I made it to this far. Divided by the 2, square root of both sides, great. Well, the square root of 25 is 5. So here's where I decided that I want to make sure that you put things in the correct place here. Okay, so for instance, I'm going to add that 1. Okay, that 1 is still not going to add to the 5. Okay, the 5 was part of the square root. I am still going to put the 1 in front of my plus or minus. Now, do you see how I have 0 square roots anywhere in my question right now? That means that I can actually find the 2 answers that this problem has. Okay? This answer, or this problem has 2 answers. One of them is 1 plus 5, which is 6. Okay, the other answer for this problem here is 1 minus the 5. So, negative 4. Alright? Hey, tomorrow it will be a live meet day. Okay, we will get on together and I will go over this, see how you're doing, answer your questions, and then you'll have a worksheet to do next week following Monday. Thanks, guys.